We begin with the war in Iran. The conflict is becoming a test of who can endure longer. The biggest pressure point appears to be the global economy as oil prices surge.
There are several new developments in the past few hours. Iran attacked commercial shipping around the Strait of Hormuz today, setting fire to a Thai cargo ship. Iranian drones also targeted Dubai's airport, and the U.S. has launched airstrikes for 12 days now. Israel is also striking inside Iran, while also hitting what it says are Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. An Israeli report says Iran's new supreme leader was actually hurt early on in the conflict. KCRA is also working to verify reports that Iran has potential plans to target the United States, specifically California.
And Governor Newsom says his administration is broadly preparing for possible public safety threats as the war with Iran escalates. Our KCRA 3 political director, Ashley Zavala, was on the call with the governor and other media earlier today, and you asked him about it. What is he saying?
Yeah, off the top, we should note the governor is saying that his administration is not aware of any imminent threats right now in California. But he did say the state is ready for an emergency that could happen because of the war. The governor talked about this in a virtual press conference with reporters this afternoon. Reports about that possible threat came out about a half an hour before the governor started speaking today. The governor noted he did activate the State Emergency Operations Center when the war started. I asked if his administration considers that drone threat credible. He did not directly respond to that. When the war started, he noted he did have concerns overall after the mass shooting in Austin, Texas, which investigators have been looking into as a possible act of terrorism. Here's what the governor had to say.
Our team that's assembled, which is a multi-jurisdictional team, a lot of federal agencies that are part of our State Operations Center, a lot of experts in state, but as well as local law enforcement, and it's all around intelligence collecting, and it's all about a posture of preparedness for worst-case scenarios. So, no, we have been gaming those out for some time. As it relates to, again, what has been highlighted, again, it's not a surprise, and it's sort of part of the larger spectrum of considerations that we have as it relates to doing what we can to support our federal partners and local partners at the state level in terms of what could happen next. And again, the questions are in abundance at the moment about what can happen next.
I did ask the governor if he's spoken to President Donald Trump about this. He said no, not directly. But again, state emergency management officials say they're working with federal authorities, as they always do, to keep people safe.
So did the governor talk about the oil and gas situation today?
Right. I actually did ask about that, too. The governor said he's gaming out worst case scenarios and blaming this war for California's rise in gas prices. Now, I did talk with my sources in the oil industry this morning who noted the state's loss of 2 oil refineries has made California more vulnerable to price spikes and impacts from a global conflict. They said we're seeing it now, essentially. The governor said his administration is meeting with the industry regularly. He is not saying yet what exactly the state's worst case scenarios could be specifically. But again, even before this war started, Republicans at every level have been saying that California's oil situation is a national security issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, our supply was already going down because of those refineries.
Yes.
And you add this on top of it, which is also putting a pinch on the supply. And then, of course, we're switching to the summer blend and not the greatest time.
The system is fragile.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashley.